All right, we're going to continue on here working with our wireframe. Now, one quick thing I want to point out back here in our Photoshop document, we're working on this main section, and the main section goes all the way clear down to the bottom. But we do want to include a slight gap down here on our web page so it doesn't just end right here. So in order to do that, we're going to add one additional property here to our main div. We're going to say margin dash bottom. And let's just set this equal to 100 pixels. And that'll ensure that the bottom edge is always at least 100 pixels away from the bottom edge of the web browser to give us this look at all times. So I think that's most of the work we need to do to the main div. Let's jump back to our HTML and continue on down here. So we'll ignore the contents for now. So that's the last div. So we have our wrap. We have our header, we have our main, and our wireframe is coming together. Now that we have all those main sections, we'll go in and do the inner sections of each of these main two header and content sections. So let's go back up to our header div and jump back over here to our Photoshop mockup. Now inside our header div, we have two main sections. We have our logo and we have our navigation. So let's flesh out the CSS, or rather the HTML for each of those sections before we move on to the CSS for those. So inside of our logo, we're going to have our text, and our little made up company here is called Evercool Corporation. So we'll just write Evercool Corporation inside of here. And that looks fine there. Whoops, not two O's. There we go. And let's save this and come back and refresh. So there's our text there, and we're going to have to apply quite a bit of CSS because we want to get this logo to match almost identically to our logo over here. So let's come inside here, and in order to do that, we're going to add two span tags. So I'm going to do a span tag around this first word, and I'm going to hit return, and I'll do a span tag around this second word. Now, in order to target each one individually, I'll give each one a class. I'll just call this one class equals E for Evercool, and I'll come down here and call this one class equals C for corporation. Now we have this, let's flesh out the CSS. So let's jump over here to our style sheet, and let's come down here. Now we need to create a new div for our logo section, this main section right here. And it's inside of the header section, so I'm going to create it right after the header. So we'll come up in here and we'll say pound logo, and let's start and end that. And let's add some CSS to this logo section and position it in its correct spot. Now let's just double check inside of here. Yeah, that looks fine. So for this logo, we're going to position it. So let's say position absolute. So it's going to be positioned according to its parent element. The parent element of the logo div is the header div. And notice that we already added that position as relative on the header when we did that. And that's what allows us to use absolute positioning down here on the logo. So we'll set the position to absolute, and we'll set this to bottom 0. And let's give this a width and a height. Now the width and height here are going to equal the Photoshop width and height. So I can just kind of quickly come in here and measure this out, and it looks like it's about 300. Whoops. Oops, I just unselected that. It's about 300 wide, and it's about 136 tall. So if we want to get in a little bit more specific, we can probably just get right down on top of it. And it looks like the height may be around 100 pixels. So what we're going to do is we'll just say for the width, we'll say 300 pixels, and for the height, we'll say 100 pixels. And let's give this a background color so we can see it. And now let's save that and come back and refresh up here. So now that's positioned right down in its correct spot. Now we can do the CSS for these two words. So again, those come after the logo section. They're children of the logo div. So we're going to say .c because we did I believe we did a class name on that. Yeah, we said class equals C. So .c, And well, let's just do another one down here called dot, actually we did dot E and dot C. There we go. So the first one here, let's change the font family. So I'm going to say font-family, and I'm going to set this font equal to Myriad Pro, which is a font I have installed on my computer. We'll talk about fonts a little bit more, but you'd probably want to set this to a font from the Google font library, and in order to, or some other custom font for your website. If you just Google for Google Fonts, this first link here, the Google Font Library, is a big library of over 600 open source free fonts you can embed in your website. So you can come in here and pick one and say add to collection. It'll kind of walk you through the steps of embedding this. But if you do want to use some custom typography, you'll want to move to one of these fonts. Now I'm setting Myriad Pro, and just so that it matches my Photoshop document, because this font happens to be Myriad Pro. But everyone who doesn't have this font installed on their computer, which is probably a good majority of the people, they're not going to see that fancy font. They'll just see some default font. So you wouldn't want to really do this in a live website. You'd want to use that Google Font Library and pick a font for your logo that way. So having said that, I'm going to leave it there. Now let's set the font size here to 16 points, and let's position this guy as well. So we're going to position this absolutely, and I'll set the background color to yellow so we can see that. And we're going to position this, whoops, this is the E, so I'm just going to guess here, let's say 50 pixels from the bottom, and from the left edge, so this is the Evercool, so it's going to be up maybe 50 pixels, and it's over slightly, you can see, so maybe it's over, I don't know, 50 as well. Let's just guess for now. Left 50 pixels, and we'll save and refresh, and you can see there's that E moved down. Now I need to double check something in here. Let's see, span class is E, so that's the E, and this one is the C, so that looks good. Now, what I was noticing is you'll see that it actually is being applied to both of those elements, so something is wrong here. And I think I just noticed the error. The problem is I have an opening span tag, but this is supposed to be a closing span tag, and this is also supposed to be closed. So I did not close those, so now if we refresh, that's correct. So now there's the Evercool word. And the color of the text is not black, but the color is white. So we'll come back down to this E, and we'll say color pound FFF. That's the shorthand hexadecimal value for white. And refresh, and there that color is. So I'm going to get rid of that background color because that looks like it's positioned close enough for now. I'll tweak these in just a second. And we're going to apply almost all the same properties to the C. So I'm going to copy all of this and just paste it down in here. And I just need to change a few values. So for the C, I'll change from 16 to 36 points. And it's still going to be positioned, but it's going to be bottom. Instead of 50, maybe it's only 20 pixels away from the bottom. And maybe it's only a few pixels away from the left edge, so 10. So we'll save that and come back and refresh. And that's pretty close. If we come back and look at our Photoshop mockup, you can see that's getting in there a little bit. It looks like I need to maybe move my E, or my Evercool, up into the left a little bit. So I'll come up into the E, and we'll say maybe bottom equals 55 and left maybe equals 40, and save and refresh, and that's about right. So that Evercool Corporation part is now complete, and it's sitting over there in the top left corner like it should. So in the next video, we'll move on, and we're going to start to flesh out this navigation section.